Hi, I'm Bob Butler from KCBS Radio San Francisco. Welcome to a forum of candidates running for 3 seats on the Pinole City Council. Today's forum is sponsored by the Contra Costa Elections Division, the Contra Costa Television, the League of Women Voters of Diablo Valley, and the League of Women Voters of West Contra Costa County. We're recording these roundtables here in the studio of Contra Costa Television. Now, the candidates are here with us today: Rafael Menace, Norma Martínez-Rubin, and Maureen Toms. Timothy Banuelos, Vincent Salimi, Anthony Tave, and Patrick Doe were unable to attend. We do lots before the show to determine the speaking order, so we will start with Rafael Menace. Why are you running?
I'm running because I think Pinole faces fiscal risks in its future, and the people need to know about that in order to deal with it before it's too late. There's a series of interlinked problems. The first problem is that Pinole, just as a structural matter, gets about 40% of its unbound revenue from sales tax, which is fine when the economy's good like it is right now. But when there's a recession, that leaves the city's finances vulnerable. And if the big box store model, which Pinole relies on, and at least the Fitzgerald Mall, goes out of favor and more big box stores close like Osh and Toys R Us have, that could also be a longer term threat to that revenue source.
Okay, thank you. Norma?
Thank you. My background is in public health, so I have an orientation that's in prevention and community and population health. The volunteer work that I've done and the professional work that I've had over the years, close to 30 professionally and living in Pinole for 24 years, the work that I've done is oriented toward communities, and the work that is a council member's responsibility, I see as an extension of that community orientation. I'm interested in being a liaison and facilitator between the public and what they are interested in a council member doing and taking action on, and I think I can do that. My experience in the on the Planning Commission for 9 years and a number of other oversight boards and ad hoc tasks, committees and task forces related to the economy in Pinole, as well as housing issues, has acquainted me with some of the aspects and functions of the Pinole City Council, and I think I can do a good job.
Thank you. Maureen, you're on the council now. Why, aren't you tired of it?
No. I've been on the council for 3 years now. I was appointed at the end of 2015, and I was able to bring my experience both from my work in Contra Costa County as a planner and the volunteer work that I've gained from being on the Planning Commission, the Bond Oversight Board, and just a lot of different volunteering that I've done. I've been able to bring that to the council. I am interested in continuing on the council because I see that we need to continue our recovery from the times in which we had bad economic times. We've had periods where we've had to lay off staff, we've had to close a fire station, and that recovery it doesn't bounce back immediately. We need to look at some long-term solutions that will carry us into the next decade.
So that's actually a problem that's facing almost all cities and counties because of the recession. What's more important for the city right now? Building new homes or commercial space, or rehabbing, expanding, better utilizing existing homes and storefronts? What do you think?
The city of Pinole is largely already developed, and we have a number of structures that do require renovation and rehabilitation. Some of them are our own government structures. The availability of land space in the city is fairly limited for new construction of homes. The city does what it can to accommodate or to meet its requirements from of the state to allow for additional housing, particularly housing that is affordable, but there are limitations in terms of land use. So the blend that we have right now, I see as a good blend that allows for open space, some housing, and as well as the commercial enterprises that are needed to bring in revenue that helps support the infrastructure for all of that.
Maureen, you're on the council now. Is there room for more development?
There is. We have a number of vacant and underutilized sites, especially along our San Pablo Avenue corridor. So there are opportunities for some multifamily, higher density dwelling units that are on that corridor, close to transit. And that's where we can get some additional housing. There's not a lot of opportunities beyond that area for new housing, but as far as commercial, we have an opportunity, and we're going to have a need to take a look at some of the vacancies that are happening in our retail areas to sort of decide what kind of new uses for the new economies we can use in that area. We have a jobs housing imbalance in this part of West County, and by bringing jobs and those kinds of uses, that will help with traffic too.
Thank you. Raphael, you were very concerned about the budget, and I was doing some research, and you're very on the one hand, you love solar. On the other hand, you're concerned about solar, and you're worried about sales tax. Shopping malls now, some people say that their time is limited because of online shopping. So what's the solution?
Well, part of the solution is, people going ahead and shopping at their local stores. In the short to medium term, that'll help keep the stores open. Longer term, I think the city needs to find new revenue sources so it's not as reliant on the big box store model of revenue, because like you said, over time, the shopping malls probably are going to decline just as people going there shift more towards doing things online. It's why I've been discussing the various things. I think at just this past city council meeting, Maureen and Norma were both there, so they can back me up on this point. I was discussing some revenue measures that the city could take if it wanted to reopen the fire station that was closed, because I think the city should seek to do that. I think it's a public safety risk just due to the way that Pinole's laid out. There's the high school right before Pinole Valley. And if a fire truck is going down Pinole Valley Road and they have to go past the high school in rush hour, they might not be able to. So
let's stay with you, because I was looking on the issue of solar, where people are saying solar power, you should get solar power, but you're concerned because of the utility taxes. Explain that.
So a lot of people have complained about the utility user tax measure that's up on this year's ballot because it has no sunset. But based on the information the City Council gave out at its June 5th meeting on the utility user tax, I believe that it is effectively a self-sunsetting measure. It's levied on transmission, so it's levied on landlines, on electricity, transmission, and on gas. Now, gas probably isn't going to change that much unless the state decides to ban the use of natural gas for heating, but electricity transmission might decrease due to the mandate for all new home construction to have solar panels on it. I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think having increased solar power makes it so that there's more renewable energy in the community. But at the same time, it means that the city's share of utility user tax for electricity is lower. And of course, landlines have been declining, will continue to decline.
Yeah. Or do you think there's a way to marry the two, solar power and the offset with the utility tax? I mean, I have solar, and I know that I'm paying PG&E less than I used to. How does that work?
Well, I think that, we want to make sure in the state and even in the city with our move to MCE, Marin Clean Energy, we do have an interest in reducing greenhouse gases. That's number one in my book. And as folks start to transition from PG&E or MCE electricity that's created and developed elsewhere and then transmitted to their homes, that's going to happen over time. So we will have more time. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is something, for a 10-year outlook that we need to take a look at and respond to it.
Okay. Norma, if there's one thing you could change in Pinole, what would it be?
A number of citizens that participate in the activities at City Hall. Having been on the Planning Commission for about 9 years now, I am super excited when there's an audience, which means more than 5 people at the dais discussing an issue that affects not only the applicants for a development project, but the city in its entirety. And very few people participate, as well, very few people participate in are live in the audience when city council meetings are held. And though there may be a group of individuals that are regular attendees, there's still a lack of participation. And one knows again and again that in government, accountability is best demonstrated when there's transparency in government and when there's citizen engagement and participation.
If you get on the council and you solve this issue, you can probably sell it to every city around the country.
Let's do it.
Because I think that is an issue not just in Pinole, but all cities when it comes, and organizations.
Yes.
You have a few people that are involved and everybody else kind of comes along for the ride. Raphael, if there's one thing you could change, what would it be?
If there's one thing I could change, it would be how the city government communicates with its residents. I hope that when the city's website redesign is complete, that it'll be easier for people to access information on it, but I don't know when exactly that will be. But right now, it can be somewhat difficult to access the information that the city makes available just due to the way the website's designed and information's laid out on there. For example, the thing I've been working on for the past few weeks is the city sends out a PDF version of its budget, and candidates ask the city government's office if they'd be willing to, make the spreadsheet that the city used to generate the budget available, and they said, no, we'd rather not do that or hand out the graphs. So I went ahead and I converted the entire thing into a spreadsheet and made some graphs and then sent it out to all the candidates. But that's the sort of data that I would like to be more accessible to the public rather than a private individual having to generate that data.
Why doesn't the city do that?
I think if the city doesn't have control over the data, it can be manipulated.
Sitting on a PDF which can't be changed.
Right, right.
You're saying you'd like to see it put out in a spreadsheet form, which could be manipulated like a spreadsheet.
It can be manipulated and changed, but at the same time, the PDF version is always going to be there. So if somebody wants to lie about something, they could say, no, look at the PDF. This is what the PDF says.
I don't see why people would want to lie about something, but well, I'm a reporter. I'm not going to say that. Let me take that back. One thing about Pinole that you think can be improved quickly.
Quickly improved. That's a tough question. I would like to see property owners take more interest in improving their own properties and the city as well. We have a major street in Pinole Valley, and the property owners don't have street trees. There's, property owners that don't keep up their landscaping. We have some out-of-town property owners that rent their properties that don't have an interest in keeping up their property. So I think with that, if we have just our citizens take more of an interest in investing in their own properties, I think that would really help our appearance. And by planting more trees along the way, that gets us further towards implementing our climate action plan.
Mm-hmm. Norma, we talk about health.
Yes.
Having more trees is good for the environment. What would you do as a city council person to encourage property owners to plant trees and to keep up their properties?
That's a good question. I think those individuals who have property and are owners tend to be exhibit the pride in ownership into keeping their landscaping neat and orderly, and others who are more absentee owners are the ones who don't. So to encourage, I don't want to go the route of incentives because that would be a cost to the city. But I think as a public health educator, one of the things that we have done in public health is to alter norms and to make the opportunity to be part of something bigger and that benefits the entire community, not just self, a norm. And so that requires a continual flow of information from those interested in changing or altering the norms, in this case, government or city hall, and a continual information sharing and education about what is acceptable. And that's what we're talking about, wanting to encourage something that's useful and helpful not only to one property, but to the entire city.
Raphael, what does the council do right?
I think that the council, for the most part, has done a good job at recovering from the recession and ensuring that the city does have, some variety in its revenue sources, even if maybe not as much as I would like. I do acknowledge that, the utility user tax is a significant portion of the city's budget and it's not just another sales tax, so I appreciate that it's there. I think the city council does a good job at the council meetings of listening to public input. They're willing to, hear what I have to say and respond to my questions when I have them, and I appreciate that as, a member of the public. And I think that overall, one of the things that's not necessarily a thing the council does well so much as it avoids doing poorly is it's avoided even the appearance of corruption, because in Hercules that was an issue, and I'm glad that in Pinole we haven't had that problem.
What can the council do better, do you think? Or are you perfect?
No, we're not perfect. What we need to do better is I think we need to work with staff better and work with our public better. We have a very, very capable staff. All of our employees are great. I do wish that we were able to pay them more competitive salaries, and that gets back to our income and our budget. And I think we could probably communicate with our constituents better on making sure that our priorities are set, that we're all on the, we all have the same priorities.
One of the questions given to me was, do you think the city needs term limits or to keep term limits? I mean, I don't know what the limits are.
Right, we do have term limits that were voted in 2008, and I think that there's a downside to having term limits. We did have an opportunity to repeal them. I saw the writing on the wall where it was going to create a lot of chaos and bad feeling in the city, so I voted not to put it on the agenda, on the ballot. However, when it was on the ballot, I did support the repeal. I think that since we're the only city in Contra Costa County with term limits, it puts Pinole at a disadvantage regionally. When we're on regional commissions such as MTC or ABAG or the Air Quality District, you're going to have representatives from the cities that have served their communities for 20, 24 years, whereas Pinole, if we limit them to 12 years, we're not going to get that regional perspective.
For those viewers and voters who don't know, what are the term limits in Pinole?
Term limits are three terms. So it's a 12-year maximum now.
So 3 4-year terms.
Right, and through this 2018 election is going to be the first time that somebody is termed out. So we have 2 more council members that will be termed out in the 2020 election. So after 2020, we're going to have pretty much a whole new council, and we'll lose that history as well.
The history and the institutional knowledge.
Correct.
Norma, do you think term limits are good or bad?
I think they are good. I think the institutional knowledge is of value, certainly. But for someone who can acquire the experience through the accountability, which means in terms of a number of reports that are required of councils and governments to make public, to the extent that the decisions that are made by a council are documented for perpetuity or the longevity to be studied and to be learned from, and then to use or not. That's history that can be acquired through study, and then the application certainly is different once one is seated in the council seat. I can't say that that is not, one, just studying it is sufficient. And I do have an appreciation for institutional knowledge, but I don't think it's absolutely the key reason for not having term limits.
But you have
pardon me.
Oh, so go ahead.
No, I wouldn't have the opportunity to run as a candidate if there weren't term limits possibly.
But you have a concern about people not being involved in government.
Yes.
And now you're saying, okay, but people aren't getting involved, but the people who do get involved can only last a certain period of time, and then they have to go. You lose the institutional knowledge that they have. Mm-hmm. Isn't that a problem?
It is a problem. So the question is, if we do have term limits, perhaps there is another opportunity in a different way for people who would be interested in being involved to that degree. Unfortunately, not everyone makes that commitment to do so, to step up and to be as available for all the responsibilities that a council has. The attendance at various, not only local meetings, but regional meetings with state partners, et cetera, to make things happen. We're not in a bubble in Pinole. It's a small city that is surrounded by a number of others that face comparable or different conditions that certainly affect us.
Raphael, what do you think?
I think that, first of all, I'd like to note that the term limit is not a lifetime limit. You have to set out for one election cycle, and then if you want to run again, you can. So if the people who are termed out feel like the loss of their institutional knowledge is so great that they need to serve the community, they can run again in the next cycle. It's not like it's a lifetime bar on holding office like the presidential term limit is. And I also think that there is a benefit to offset the cost of the loss of institutional knowledge, and that benefit is the rotation of power. By default, power tends to accumulate to incumbents and remain there absent a change for some cause. And having a forced interruption of that power allows for new voices and new ideas to be heard and represented that might not necessarily be if the same people stay on this city council for 20 or 40 years.
So previously, we're almost out of time. Previously, there were 3 council members recalled in Pinole. Since that time, the city, has it been better, worse, the same?
It's been different. I think that's the best way to say. We have had some divisions in the community back when the recall happened, and some of those divisions have not been repaired, those relationships. And you know, for that reason, I think it's a very difficult thing. It might be a whole generation until that's repaired.
Norma?
As a citizen witnessing the work of the council since the 2008 recall, I think it's been better in that the council people have been conscientious and responsible and have avoided conflicts of interest.
Raphael?
I think that ultimately the community needs to reintegrate both sides, both of the factions, if you will, that were involved in the recall, because otherwise I'm concerned that we'll just be going through the same process again in a few years.
I want to thank our candidates for answering some of these important questions. Each candidate will now have 1 minute to make a closing statement. We'll begin with incumbent Maureen Thoms.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for CCTV for sponsoring this and the League of Women Voters. I'm Maureen Thoms, and I'm running for council again. I am mainly interested in continuing the city's recovery from the economic downturn. We need to stabilize our budget, pass the utility users tax, so that our employees have some reasonable assurances that they can stay employed and that our citizens will continue to receive the services we're able to and slowly work towards improving those services. And by improving those services, I mean expanding library time, look at ways where we can reopen the station in the valley, and then work towards addressing the climate action plan and issues related to that in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Raphael.
So my name is Raphael Mez, as I'm sure you all have heard and seen amply by now. And I'm running, as I said earlier, because I think that we as a community need to do more to secure Pinole's financial future. As I said in my opening statement, and I'll expand on briefly now, I think that Pinole's general revenue stream is overly dependent on one source of revenue, and that we need to consider as a community other revenue sources to stabilize the services that, as Maureen said, we can provide as a city in good times and in bad. I feel that right now there isn't necessarily the popular support for that. And so the city should undertake certain actions to build popular support, like longer hours for the library and like reopening the fire station in Pinole Valley.
Thank you very much, Raphael. Finally, Norma.
Thank you. We want strong police and fire services, family-oriented recreation, clean streets, and responsive city staff. We want Pinole as we've known it when city budgets seemed adequate, obligations in order, and public employees visibly active. Pinole is recovering from cuts stemming from the Great Recession. At the same time, we continue to have state-imposed obligations and long-term debt. Our reliance on property sales and other voter-approved taxes is largely affected by fluctuations in our economy. We are not the only city with this experience. Addressing our local issues requires being available to work with local, regional, and state entities toward goals that are in the best interest of all Pinole residents. I look forward to doing my best with your input and theirs. I respectfully ask for your vote to allow me to represent you on the Pinole City Council. Thank you. I'm Norma Martínez-Rubin.
Thank you to our candidates for being here today. That concludes our forum for candidates running for the Pinole City Council in the November 6th general election. Once again, our candidates, Raphael Mez, Norma Martínez-Rubin, and Maureen Toms. Timothy Benuelos, Vincent Salimi, Anthony Tave, and Patrick Doe were unable to attend, but they're on the ballot. For more information on the candidates, visit the website of voteredge.org. To view this broadcast, go to www.cocovote.us, and don't forget the deadline to register for this election, October 22nd. I'm Bob Butler from KCBS Radio. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to vote November 6th.